Thank you all for joining us. We're so excited to be live with you all today. We're going to be talking about one of our more recent reports, Vulnerabilities to Climate Change in Frontline Communities, Opportunities and Shortcomings. How are you, Zulie and Jennifer, doing today?
Thanks, Taylor. Doing well.
Good, thank you.
Good, good. Well, let's dive into some intros. For everyone who doesn't know, my name is Taylor Ward. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Senior Manager of Communications and Education at Just Solutions. I'm joined today by Zulie Juarez, Senior Research and Policy Analyst at Just Solutions, and Jennifer Moon, Senior Researcher at Just Solutions. And we're super excited for today's conversation. If you don't know who Just Solutions is, I'll give you a little background. Just Solutions is a BIPOC-led national climate organization that partners with communities disproportionately impacted by climate change to turn their priorities and ideas into policies and laws. We draw from community-created solutions and invest deeply in innovator states where justice-centered organizations and coalitions have demonstrated the vision, the strategy, and political power to win and implement climate policies that strengthen their communities' health, economic security, and resiliency. So we're going to just dive into these questions. We look forward to seeing your thoughts in the chat. So the first question is for you, Zulie. Can you give us some context about this report and its relationship to the report you both released last year titled The Perfect Storm for Extraction, Poverty, and Climate Change?
Of course. Thanks, Taylor. And just to give some background, in 2023, Just Solutions published The Perfect Storm of Extraction, Poverty, and Climate Change. And this report really takes a case study approach to examine the pre-existing economic, health, and infrastructure conditions in 6 frontline communities across the country. So the report argues that the economic, health, and infrastructure conditions experienced by these communities are the direct consequences of enacted policies that have deprived these communities of resources and assets, environmentally degraded or undervalued their lands, and overall facilitated systemic racism. So this new follow-up report titled Vulnerabilities to Climate Change in Frontline Communities, Opportunities and Shortcomings really considers the degree to which the historic federal investments enabled by the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, also known as IRA, and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021, also known as IIJA, might improve the underlying economic health and infrastructure conditions highlighted in our first report of the perfect storm. But in this new report, we conclude that with careful implementation that really center the needs and voices of the most impacted communities, key provision in both the IRA and the IIJA could further contribute to addressing greenhouse gas reduction goals and could then cumulatively help improve the conditions that exist in frontline communities. However, numerous challenges do remain, and these challenges include 3 key things, and that's shortcomings in the statutes that really fall short of meeting the needs of BIPOC and frontline communities. The second is implementation process affecting how and where the funds are dispersed and who receives them. And the third being the need for future policy advocacy, design, and implementation of economic and social solutions to really advance a just transition.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. I really hope folks take the time to read it. It's a great report. And so considering the impact of the IRA and IIJA on frontline communities, in what ways are you seeing these federal investment opportunities fall short?
Yeah, that's a great question. So although historic in their reach and scope, right, we've heard so much about IRA and IIJA, they are insufficient to meet the climate justice and clean energy needs of the moment. They both should be regarded as really down payments as the investments made in infrastructure and climate fall short of the need. And we know that the need is great. So in 2022, our colleague, actually, Sylvia Chi, Senior Policy Analyst at Just Solutions, published an article titled Analysis of the Inflation Reduction Act, where they found that many claims related to the benefits of IRA for frontline communities are overstated. So their detailed analysis of the EJ provisions in the IRA examined both beneficial investment and areas where estimates of the effects of the legislation on EJ communities have been inflated, and really what policymakers and mainstream advocates overreach to suggest are environmental justice investments. So an example of that is the supporters of the IRA have claimed that the law provides $60 billion in EJ funding, without really demonstrating how the number is calculated. So a section by section analysis of IRA's text to add up appropriations and other spending tailored towards EJ communities and low-income residents arrive at a total of 40 billion or 27 billion in appropriations only. And I think it is important to note that for the purpose of the analysis, Just Solutions evaluated provisions of the IRA based on their likelihood to directly reach EJ communities in the US and their residents. So if viewers are interested in learning more, particularly about the IRA IJA and some of these sections, I highly recommend reading the full report, which can be accessed on the website. And this is really the research that we use, the research provided in Sylvia's analysis, the research we use to then include in our report to help justify some of the shortcomings.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. And then, Jennifer, this question is for you. What were the factors that determined whether or not provisions from the IRA and the IIJA can improve the pre-existing conditions in frontline communities?
Yeah, thanks, Taylor. It was really pretty straightforward. We wanted to take a broad look at the potential effects of the IRA and the IIJA, and it really came down to a question of whether or not the provisions that we were looking at, contained in the legislation, had any potential relationship to economic health and infrastructure conditions in those communities. And could those provisions potentially improve the health and well-being of frontline communities? So we included some of the prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements that are contained in the legislation, as well as the various healthcare related provisions in the IRA, and of course, many of the infrastructure investments in the IIJA. And in our report, we particularly highlighted the high efficiency electric home rebate program, additional funding that was allocated to the LIHEAP program for low-income home energy assistance, the premium assistance that was contained in the IRA for Affordable Care Act coverage, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, and infrastructure investments in sewer and stormwater systems.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. And then what would you say were your biggest takeaways in working on this report? Did anything in particular stand out to you?
I think there's a number of provisions in the IRA and the IIJA that we found have the potential to benefit frontline communities in terms of economic health and infrastructure conditions. But whether or not they do benefit communities is going to depend on several factors, right? So things like the degree to which the Justice 40 initiative is successfully implemented, whether or not states that are administering the funds that are flowing to them through the legislation, if they implement programs in a way that advances equity, and whether or not frontline communities are actually able to access the funds. So sometimes complicated grant applications or limited administrative capacity can present barriers and prevent frontline communities from actually being able to access funds. So, and then another barrier is that some grant programs require that the grantee provide the upfront capital to finance the grant and project activities, and then they're reimbursed later. So these kind of barriers will make the difference in determining the degree to which frontline communities are able to benefit from the legislation and actually improve those pre-existing conditions in their communities.
Great. Thank you for sharing those insights. And as we're getting to the end of our little interview, is there anything you both want to share about what you're currently working on or what folks can look forward to in your work?
Well, I've been working on a couple blog posts about a new drinking water service boundary data set that was just released by the EPA earlier this month, and also a blog that looks at deferrals from the Weatherization Assistance Program. And in relation to the EPA, for the first time, this data set provides a way of linking Safe Drinking Water Act violations across the country to the actual households that are drinking that water. So now through this mapping project, you can tell, who is being impacted. And that blog was just published this week. And then for the Weatherization Assistance Program deferral blog, I'm looking at the problem of people being denied assistance because of major home repair needs that they have. And that should be published early next week. So look for that.
Wonderful. Anything from you, Zilly?
Yeah, so for myself, next month, August, I'll be publishing a policy brief that I co-authored titled Housing and Climate Equity, an analysis of climate and housing policies that benefit EJ communities and low-income tenants. And in this brief, we analyzed similarly to IRA and IIJA programs that provided targeted investments in housing, and that's the Green and Resilient Retrofit Program and the Weatherization Assistance Program. And we provide recommendations on ways to improve both programs by enhancing partnerships, inclusive outreach, centering tenants in the process, and tailoring technical assistance. And the brief also recommends also highlights 4 innovative policy models in New York, in Portland, Pennsylvania, and in California that are working at the intersections of housing and climate justice and really improving overall housing quality and reducing climate footprints. And one last thing too is I hosted a podcast episode on the Just Solutions podcast set to publish in August, where I discussed community research with the authors of a recently published book titled Ground Truths Community Engaged Research for Environmental Justice. It is the first book devoted entirely to summarizing the body of community engaged research on environmental justice, how we can conduct more of it, and how we can do it better. So definitely more to come.
Amazing, amazing. I love hearing about both of your work, our whole team's work. It's one of my favorite parts of my job is to just learn from you all. So I encourage everyone listening to check out our website to stay in tuned with what's being released. We also have an email list so you can get all of this great information straight to your email inbox. And I want to thank everyone for jumping on with us today. Thank you, Zuli and Jennifer, for speaking with me and sharing your insights. As I mentioned, please check out our team's work at justsolutionscollective.org. This live stream will live on our YouTube channel. So does some of our past webinars, our video series. So make sure you're subscribed to our channel. And you can also stay informed on all of our activities on our social media channels, which are linked in our bio. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you.
Hey.